The fluorescent lights flickered in the high-security wing of Unigen Biotech's research hospital. At 2:17 a.m., most of the facility lay dormant, but not the hematology lab. Dr. Lena Park pressed her palms against her tired eyes, hoping the momentary darkness might reset her focus. 36 hours into what should have been a 12-hour shift, the samples had begun to blur together. Just 3 more, she whispered to herself, reaching for sample HB235. The routine was mechanical now. Prepare slide, analyze composition, log results, repeat. Nothing remarkable about this one. Standard protein markers, normal hemoglobin levels, expected white cell count. HB236 followed. Again, nothing that would interest anyone outside the narrow field of hematological research. Lena suppressed a yawn. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Still analyzing Corwin's miracle samples? Any unicorn blood yet? She smiled despite her exhaustion. Marco Silva had been her closest friend since med school, now working just 2 floors below in bioinformatics. His humor kept her sane during these marathon sessions that had become increasingly common at Unigen. The company's investors were hungry for breakthroughs, and management had responded by demanding longer hours and faster results. Lena didn't bother responding to the text. She'd see Marco for coffee in a few hours anyway. Instead, she reached for the final vial, HB237. The sample looked ordinary, deep crimson with that familiar metallic scent that permeated any hematology lab. She prepared the slide with practiced precision, slid it under the microscope, and adjusted the focus. At first glance, nothing unusual appeared in the standard optical view. But protocol required a full spectrum analysis for all samples in this batch. She switched to the spectral analyzer and initiated the scan. The machine hummed softly as it broke down the sample's elemental composition. Lena leaned back in her chair, expecting the usual 5-minute wait. At exactly 2:26 a.m., the analyzer emitted a high-pitched tone Lena had never heard before. She sat up straight, immediately alert. The screen displayed a warning. Spectral anomaly detected. Unknown elemental signature present. That can't be right, she muttered, leaning closer to examine the results. The spectral signature showed all the expected elements: hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, iron, and other trace minerals found in human blood. But there at the far end of the spectrum was a peak that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist according to any known element on the periodic table. Lena blinked, certain she was hallucinating from fatigue. She ran the analysis again. Same result. The mysterious peak remained, defying explanation. Her heart rate quickened as she reached for her tablet to log the anomaly. But when she pulled up the digital record for HB237, she found something even more disturbing. The sample's origin data was incomplete. The donor information showed only a patient ID number with no name, no age, no medical history, nothing that might explain the anomaly. She checked the acquisition timestamp. The sample had been collected yesterday at 15:43, but the receiving log in the system showed it arriving at the lab at 14:30, more than an hour before it was collected. What the hell? Lena muttered, scrolling through the digital log. Something else caught her attention. The log showed gaps, missing minutes around the time the sample was processed. Someone had tampered with the records. She reached for her phone to call Marco, but stopped short when the lab door slid open. Dr. Marcus Corwin, Unigen's chief technology officer, stood in the doorway. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, his blue eyes unnervingly alert. "Dr. Park," he said, his voice smooth and controlled. "Working late again. Dedication like yours is what makes Unigen exceptional." Lena instinctively switched her screen to a different sample's data. "Just finishing up the last batch, sir." Corwin strolled into the lab, his expensive shoes clicking against the polished floor. "Anything interesting in today's samples?" The question seemed casual, but Lena detected an undercurrent of something else, anticipation, perhaps. "Nothing out of the ordinary," she lied, unsure why she felt compelled to hide her discovery. Something about Corwin's presence, about the tampered logs, about the impossible spectral peak, It all felt wrong. Hmm. Corwin nodded, glancing at the analyzer. Well, don't stay too much longer. We need your mind sharp for tomorrow's board presentation. After he left, Lena quickly saved a copy of the spectral data to her personal encrypted drive, a violation of protocol she'd never committed before. Then she completed the official log with deliberately vague language. Sample exhibits unusual spectral characteristics. Further analysis recommended. Before leaving, she secured a small portion of HB-237 in a separate vial and slipped it into her lab coat pocket. Another serious breach of protocol that could cost her job. But the mysterious peak and the tampered records demanded investigation. And Lena wasn't sure she could trust the official channels at Unigen anymore. The hospital corridors were eerily quiet as she made her way to the staff locker room. Rumors had been circulating among the research staff for weeks. Whispers of unexplained patient anomalies, of corporate pressure to deliver breakthrough data to shareholders. Until tonight, Lena had dismissed these as typical research hospital gossip. Now she wasn't so sure. In the safety of her apartment, she finally allowed herself to acknowledge what she had discovered. Something impossible existed in sample HB-237, something that defied the known laws of chemistry and physics. Whatever it was, Unigen already knew about it, and someone wanted to control who else found out. Sleep eluded her that night as questions multiplied in her mind. What was the unknown element? Where had it come from? Why was Unigen being secretive about it? And most troubling of all, whose blood contained an element that shouldn't exist? Morning arrived with no answers, only the certainty that she needed help from someone she could trust. She texted Marco, "Coffee. 7 a.m. The place across from the park. Important." His reply came seconds later. "Must be serious if you're willing to drink their coffee. See you there." Marco was already waiting when she arrived. His lanky frame hunched over a steaming cup, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd had as little sleep as she had. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting, pushing a cup toward her. "Thanks. You're not winning any beauty contests either." Lena sat down, glancing around to ensure no other Unigen employees were within earshot. Marco leaned forward. "So what's with the cloak and dagger routine? Your text had government conspiracy written all over it." Lena took a sip of coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste. "I found something last night, in a blood sample, something that shouldn't be possible. Vampires, aliens, zombies." Marco grinned. "I'm serious, Marco. Look at this." She slid her tablet across the table, displaying the spectral analysis from HB-237. Marco's smile faded as he examined the data. His expertise in bioinformatics made him one of the few people who would immediately understand the implications. "This can't be right," he muttered, echoing her words from the previous night. "This peak here, it's not on the periodic table." "Exactly. And there's more." She explained about the tampered logs and Corwin's suspicious appearance. Marco whistled softly. "So you think Unigen already knows about this? Whatever it is. I think they're deliberately looking for it, and I think they found it in patient HB-237. Do you know who that is?" Lena shook her head. The record was incomplete, probably intentionally. Marco handed back the tablet. "What do you want to do?" "I need to analyze it further, but I can't do it at Unigen. They'd know. My friend at City University might help. She runs the Advanced Materials Lab, has equipment that could give us more detail on this mystery element." Marco paused. "But Lena, if Unigen is covering this up, there must be a reason. What if it's dangerous? What if it's, I don't know, radioactive or contagious?" Lena had considered this. "That's why I need to know what it is. If it's harmful, people could be at risk." Marco studied her face. "There's something else, isn't there? Something you're not telling me." She hesitated. "Last week, there was a patient, a nurse from the oncology ward, Aisha Grant. She collapsed during her shift. Her blood work showed some unusual readings, but nothing like this. Still, it made me wonder. You think there might be others, with this thing in their blood?" Lena nodded. And I think Unigen knows who they are. For the next 2 weeks, Lena and Marco worked in secret. By day, she performed her regular duties at Unigen, carefully watching for signs that management suspected her unauthorized investigation. By night, she analyzed sample HB237 using equipment at City University, courtesy of Marco's friend. Their findings were astonishing. The unknown element, which they codenamed X109, exhibited properties unlike anything on the periodic table. It appeared to exist in a state of constant atomic reconfiguration, its half-life fluctuating in patterns that defied explanation. Most disturbing of all, when they finally identified the source of sample HB237 through Marco's careful hacking of hospital records, they discovered it came from a deep space probe technician who had recently returned from an extended mission. Space? Lena had exclaimed when Marco revealed this. You're saying this element came from space? Not necessarily, Marco cautioned. It could be a contamination that occurred after his return. We need more data. Lena devised a plan to collect anonymous blood samples from various donors at Unigen, using her position to acquire small amounts that wouldn't be missed from routine blood draws. Over a week, she gathered 20 samples from different departments throughout the hospital. The results confirmed her worst fears. X109 was present in 16 of the 20 samples. The concentration varied significantly, but the element was undeniably there. It's not just one person, she told Marco as they reviewed the data in his apartment. It's widespread among Unigen staff. Marco paced the small living room. But what is it? Where did it come from? And why isn't Unigen telling anyone? Further analysis revealed another pattern. The concentration of X109 seemed to correlate with emotional stress. Samples from emergency room staff and intensive care nurses showed higher levels than those from administrative personnel. It's responding to something, Lena theorized. Some biochemical signal related to stress or emotion. Marco's hacking skills proved invaluable once again when he managed to access a restricted server containing internal memos between Unigen executives. What he found confirmed their suspicions and opened new, terrifying possibilities. They've known about X109 for months, he told Lena, his voice tight with anger. It was first detected in deep space probe materials. But get this, it wasn't present when the probes were launched. It appeared while they were in orbit around Saturn's moons. That's impossible, Lena whispered. Elements don't just appear. According to these memos, Unigen thinks it's replicating, using human physiology as a host environment. The implications were staggering. An element not found on Earth, somehow making its way into human bloodstreams and apparently reproducing itself using the body's own biological processes. Their investigation took a personal turn when Lena, on a hunch, tested her own blood. The results showed a faint but unmistakable signature of X109. I'm a carrier, she told Marco, her voice hollow. Whatever this is, it's in me too. Marco immediately tested himself. His blood also contained traces of X19, though at lower concentrations than Lena's. We have to go public with this, Lena insisted. People have a right to know what's happening to them. And say what exactly? Marco countered. That there's an alien element in our blood that might be alive? We'd be laughed out of the scientific community. Or worse, cause a panic. Then we need more evidence, something irrefutable. Their opportunity came unexpectedly when nurse Aisha Grant was readmitted to Unigen with symptoms similar to her previous collapse. Lena managed to be assigned to her case, giving her access to fresh blood samples and the chance to speak directly with one of the earliest known carriers. Aisha lay pale against the hospital sheets, her dark skin ashen with fatigue. Despite her condition, her eyes were alert and intelligent as Lena entered her room. Another blood draw? Aisha asked, offering a weak smile. You people must think I'm manufacturing the stuff. Lena closed the door and approached the bed. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about your symptoms. Off the record. Aisha's expression sharpened with interest. What's going on, Dr. Park? Have you noticed anything unusual since your first collapse? Changes in mood, perception, physical sensations? Aisha studied Lena's face. Why are you asking me this? Please, it's important. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. Dreams. Vivid ones, almost like hallucinations. Colors I've never seen before. And sometimes. She glanced at the door, lowering her voice. Sometimes I feel like my blood is humming. Like there's electricity running through it. Crazy, right? It wasn't crazy at all. It matched perfectly with the theoretical properties of X109 that Lena and Marco had documented. Aisha, I need to ask you something else. Before your first collapse, were you working with any patients who had returned from space missions? Aisha's eyes widened. How did you know? Yes, we had 3 astronauts in for routine post-mission checks. One of them had some kind of fever that wouldn't respond to antibiotics. She paused. Dr. Park, what's happening to me? Lena made a decision then that would alter the course of her career and possibly her life. She told Aisha everything about X109, about Unigen's cover-up, about her own status as a carrier. I knew something was wrong, Aisha whispered when Lena finished. The way the executives kept visiting my floor, the extra tests they ran without explaining why. She gripped Lena's hand. What does it want? The question startled Lena. Want? X109. If it's using our bodies to replicate, it must want something. To survive, to spread, to evolve. The idea that X109 might have agency, might be pursuing some kind of goal, had never occurred to Lena. It opened a disturbing new dimension to their investigation. Before Lena could respond, the door opened and Dr. Corwin entered, accompanied by a stern-looking man in a dark suit. Dr. Park, Corwin said, his voice dangerously soft. I don't recall assigning you to Nurse Grant's case. Lena straightened, trying to appear calm despite the sudden racing of her heart. I was just checking on a colleague, sir. Indeed. Corwin turned to his companion. Agent Reyes, this is Dr. Lena Park, one of our hematology researchers. The man nodded curtly. Dr. Park, I understand you've been conducting unauthorized tests on patient samples. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. They knew. Somehow, they had discovered her investigation. I don't know what you're talking about, she managed. No. Corwin raised an eyebrow. Then perhaps you can explain why you removed a portion of sample HB237 from the lab 2 weeks ago? Or why you've been accessing restricted patient files? Or why you've been using equipment at City University to analyze Unigen property? Each accusation felt like a physical blow. Lena glanced at Aisha, who looked horrified. You've been monitoring me, Lena said. Of course we have, Corwin replied smoothly. X109 is a matter of national security. Did you really think we wouldn't notice your amateur investigation? Agent Reyes stepped forward. Dr. Park, I'm placing you on administrative leave pending a full investigation into your activities. You are to surrender your access credentials and leave the premises immediately. You can't do this, Lena protested. People have a right to know what's happening to them. X109 is in the bloodstream of Unigen employees, probably others too. It's replicating, changing. That's enough, Dr. Park, Corwin snapped. Security will escort you out. As if on cue, 2 guards appeared in the doorway. Lena looked at Aisha one last time. Remember what I told you, she said urgently as the guards took her arms. It responds to emotion. Stress makes it multiply. She allowed herself to be led away, her mind racing. They would confiscate her research, silence her findings. But they didn't know about Marco, about the backup data they had stored on encrypted drives. There was still a chance to expose the truth. The next morning, Lena awoke to pounding on her apartment door. She opened it to find Marco, his face pale with panic. They took everything, he gasped, pushing past her into the apartment. My computers, my drives, even my phone. They had a warrant. Corwin. Government agents. They said I was involved in stealing proprietary medical data. Lena. They threatened to charge me with espionage. Lena sank onto her couch. They're trying to bury this. But why? What are they afraid of? Marco ran his hands through his disheveled hair. I managed to save one thing. He pulled a small flash drive from his sock. I copied the most important data before they arrived, including something I found last night. He connected the drive to Lena's laptop and pulled up a file. Remember how X109 concentrations correlate with emotional stress? I was tracking my own levels over the past week, and I noticed something weird. The screen showed a graph with spikes and valleys. See these peaks? They coincide exactly with moments of fear or anger. But here's the freaky part. The element's atomic structure changes with the emotion. It's like it's feeding on it. That can't be right, Lena said, studying the data. Elements don't respond to emotions. This one does, and there's more. Marco pulled up another file. I found the original report from the Saturn mission. The probes were specifically looking for signs of exotic matter in Saturn's rings, matter that theoretically could exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. You think X109 is exotic matter from Saturn? Not exactly. The report concludes that whatever they found didn't originate in our solar system. It suggests the material was captured by Saturn's gravity, possibly after traveling for millions of years through space. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. So we're talking about something truly alien, something that can use human emotions as a catalyst for replication. And Unigen knows, Marco added grimly. They're studying it, tracking carriers, probably trying to figure out how to weaponize it. Or control it, Lena mused. But they don't understand what they're dealing with. X109 isn't just an element, it's evolving, adapting to human physiology. A sudden thought struck her. Marco, what was your emotional state when you were testing yourself last night? Scared out of my mind, obviously. Why? And mine has been through the roof since they fired me. Lena stood up, pacing the small living room. What if we're accelerating its growth? What if our fear and stress are making it multiply faster? Marco's eyes widened. You think it's manipulating us? Making us afraid so it can replicate? I don't know, but we need to find out. Lena pulled out her phone. I'm going to call Aisha. If anyone can help us get back into Unigen, it's her. Aisha agreed to meet them that evening at a cafe several blocks from the hospital. Despite her recent collapse, she looked better than Lena expected, though tension lined her face. They're watching me, she said without preamble as she sat down. Monitoring my vitals, taking blood samples every few hours. They say it's for my own good, but they're tracking X109 levels, Lena finished for her. Aisha nodded. After you left, Corwin came back with more questions about my dreams, about the sensations I've been experiencing. He seemed excited when I described them. We need to get back into the lab, Marco said. There's a specific test we need to run to confirm our theory about emotional triggers. Impossible. Aisha shook her head. Security's been doubled. They've restricted access to the hematology lab entirely. What about the emergency protocols? Lena asked. If there were a containment breach in the high-security wing, the automated systems would lock down all non-essential personnel, but medical staff with Level 3 clearance or higher would still have access. You want to trigger a false alarm? Aisha looked skeptical. Not false, Lena said quietly. Real. Marco stared at her. What are you suggesting? Lena took a deep breath. My blood contains X109. If I can artificially accelerate its replication process, induce an emotional state that causes rapid multiplication, it might trigger the containment sensors. That's insane, Marco protested. You have no idea what could happen. This element isn't from Earth. Lena, it could kill you. I don't think it will, Lena replied, surprising herself with her certainty. It needs hosts to survive. It wouldn't eliminate a viable carrier. You don't know that, Aisha warned. This is too dangerous. Do you have a better idea? Every day, more people are being exposed. Unigen is watching carriers like lab rats while trying to figure out how to profit from this discovery. We need to understand X109 before they do. Neither Marco nor Aisha could offer an alternative plan. Reluctantly, they agreed to help. The next evening, they put their plan into motion. Aisha, still an active employee, entered Unigen through the main entrance, carrying a small device Marco had built to amplify electromagnetic signals, theoretically capable of exciting the atomic structure of X-109. Lena and Marco waited in Lena's car in the parking garage, monitoring Aisha's progress through text messages. "She's in position," Marco announced, showing Lena his phone. "Fourth floor supply closet, right above the hematology lab." Lena nodded, trying to control her racing heart. She had spent the past 24 hours deliberately increasing her stress levels, watching horror movies, drinking excessive caffeine, depriving herself of sleep. According to their research, these conditions should have elevated her X-109 concentration to detectable levels. "Are you sure about this?" Marco asked, concern etched on his face. "No," Lena admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." Her phone buzzed with a text from Aisha. "Ready when you are." Lena took a deep breath and replied, "Now." Inside the building, Aisha activated Marco's device, sending a carefully calibrated electromagnetic pulse through the ceiling into the lab below. The pulse was designed to resonate with X-109's unique atomic frequency, a frequency they had documented during their secret research. Lena closed her eyes, focusing on her most intense emotional memories: the death of her father, her first heartbreak, the terror of discovering X-109 in her own blood. She visualized the element responding, multiplying, becoming more active. At first, nothing happened. Then, a strange sensation began to spread through her body, a tingling warmth that started in her chest and radiated outward. Her heartbeat accelerated, and she felt a curious lightness in her limbs. "Lena," Marco's voice seemed to come from far away. "Are you okay?" She opened her eyes to see him staring at her in alarm. "Your nose is bleeding," he said. Lena touched her face, her fingers coming away red. The blood had an odd silvery sheen to it, a metallic quality she had never seen before. Her phone buzzed again. "Something's happening. Alarms going off in the lab. Security is responding." The plan was working. Lena grabbed her forged ID badge, prepared by Marco through less than legal channels, and opened the car door. "Let's go," she said, wiping the blood from her nose. They hurried toward the emergency entrance, where confusion had already begun to spread. Red lights flashed above the doors, and a computerized voice announced, "Containment breach detected in Laboratory 7. All non-essential personnel evacuate immediately. Medical staff report to emergency stations." Lena and Marco slipped in amid the chaos, their fake credentials going unchallenged as staff rushed to respond to the alarm. They made their way to the fourth floor, where Aisha was waiting for them. "It worked," she whispered, her eyes wide. "The sensors detected an unknown biological agent in the lab. They think it's an airborne pathogen." "Perfect," Lena said. "That gives us access and keeps everyone else away." The three of them moved quickly through the now empty corridors toward the hematology lab. Security would be focused on containment procedures rather than checking identifications. When they reached Laboratory 7, Lena swiped her forged badge. To her relief, the door slid open. Inside, emergency lights bathed the room in an eerie red glow. The spectral analyzer, the same machine that had first detected X-109, was running continuously, its screen displaying rapidly changing data. "Look at this," Marco said, moving to the computer. The sensors picked up a massive spike in electromagnetic activity just before the alarm triggered. Lena approached the analyzer, feeling a strange pull toward the machine. The tingling sensation in her body had intensified, and she could feel her pulse pounding in her temples. "I need to test my blood," she said, reaching for a collection kit. "Now, while the levels are elevated." Marco helped her draw a sample, his hands steady despite the circumstances. They loaded it into the analyzer and waited for the results. "This is incredible," Marco murmured as the data appeared on screen. X-109 concentration is 5 times higher than any previous reading. And look at the atomic structure. It's changing, reconfiguring itself in real time. Lena stared at the display, transfixed. The spectral patterns were unlike anything she had ever seen. Complex, almost beautiful in their shifting symmetry. It's not just replicating, she realized. It's evolving, becoming more complex. A sudden crash made them all jump. The glass door of a nearby centrifuge had shattered, its contents spilling across the floor. "What was that?" Isha gasped. Before anyone could answer, more glass broke, test tubes, beakers, even the reinforced windows of the containment units. All around them, laboratory equipment was failing catastrophically. "It's X-109, Lena said, understanding dawning. "The concentrated form is affecting the molecular structure of the glass. The vibrations are making it unstable." As if to confirm her theory, the glass front of the spectral analyzer cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across its surface. "We need to get out of here," Marco urged, pulling Lena's arm. "This whole place could come apart." Lena resisted. "Wait, I need to save the data. And the samples, we need proof of what's happening." The lab's main computer terminal was still functioning. Lena rushed to it, copying the analyzer's findings to a portable drive, while Marco gathered sample vials from the refrigeration unit. Aisha cried out suddenly, pointing to the far wall where a large observation window overlooked an adjacent lab. Through the glass, they could see a team of researchers in hazmat suits frantically working around what appeared to be a containment chamber. Inside the chamber, a silvery substance pulsated with an internal light. "What is that?" Marco asked, his voice hushed with awe and fear. "X-109 in its concentrated form," Lena whispered. "They've been cultivating it." The observation window began to crack, thin lines spreading from corner to corner. The researchers on the other side noticed and began backing away. Their movements panicked. A new alarm sounded, higher pitched, more urgent than the first. "Critical containment failure imminent," announced the computerized voice. "All personnel evacuate immediately. Automatic lockdown in 60 seconds. Lena faced a terrible choice. They could escape now with the data they had gathered, potentially saving themselves but leaving behind the concentrated X-109 sample, a sample that might be their only chance to truly understand the element. Or they could attempt to secure a portion of the cultivated element, risking being trapped in the lab during lockdown. The decision was made more complex by the presence of the research team in the adjacent lab. If containment failed completely, they would be directly exposed to concentrated X-109, with unknown and potentially fatal consequences. "Go!" Lena told Marco and Aisha, pressing the data drive into Marco's hand. "Get this to someone who can help, someone outside Unigen's influence." "What about you?" Isha demanded. "I'm going to help them." Lena nodded toward the researchers. "And I'm going to secure a sample." "That's suicide," Marco protested. "You'll be trapped in here." "I'm already a carrier," Lena reminded him. "Maybe that gives me some protection. Besides, we need that sample to develop a way to neutralize X-109 if necessary." Before they could argue further, another series of crashes echoed through the lab as more equipment failed. The observation window was now a maze of cracks, ready to shatter at any moment. 45 seconds to lockdown, announced the computer. "Go!" Lena insisted, pushing them toward the door. "I'll find another way out." Reluctantly, Marco and Aisha fled, leaving Lena alone in the rapidly deteriorating lab. She turned her attention to the adjacent chamber, where panic had overtaken the research team. They were hammering on their lab door, which appeared to be jammed. Lena grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and approached the observation window. Using the heavy metal canister, she struck the weakened glass repeatedly until it shattered, creating an opening between the two labs. "This way!" she shouted to the researchers. "Hurry!" One by one, they climbed through the broken window, their hazmat suits tearing on the jagged edges. Lena counted 5 researchers in total, all looking terrified behind their face shields. "What about the sample?" she asked the last one through, a young man whose name tag identified him as Dr. Wei. "Unstable," he gasped. "Complete atomic collapse imminent. We need to get out now." 30 seconds to lockdown, the computer warned. Lena peered through the broken window at the containment chamber. The silvery substance inside was pulsating more rapidly now, its glow intensifying. If Dr. Wei was right, they were witnessing the early stages of an uncontrolled reaction, possibly one that could release enormous energy. But this might be her only chance to obtain a pure sample of X109. Making a split-second decision, Lena climbed through the window into the adjacent lab. "What are you doing?" Dr. Wei cried. "It's not safe." Lena ignored him, rushing to the containment chamber. It was sealed with a digital lock, but the control panel was malfunctioning, its screen flickering with static. 20 seconds to lockdown. There was no time for finesse. Lena grabbed a metal stool and smashed it against the chamber's access panel. The reinforced plastic cracked but held. She struck again, harder, and the panel gave way. Inside, a small vial of the silvery substance remained stable while the larger sample in the main chamber continued to pulse erratically. Lena reached for the vial, her hand trembling. 10 seconds to lockdown. As her fingers closed around the vial, a wave of sensation passed through her body, a feeling of connection, of recognition. The X109 in her bloodstream seemed to resonate with the concentrated sample, creating a momentary harmony that calmed the pulsating mass in the chamber. 5 seconds. Lena secured the vial in her pocket and turned to flee. But as she reached the broken window, the main sample's pulsations suddenly accelerated, and a blinding flash of light erupted from the containment chamber. The force threw Lena backward, sending her crashing into a bank of computers. Pain exploded in her shoulder and head as she hit the equipment, then the floor. "Lockdown initiated," announced the computer as heavy metal shutters began descending over all exits. Through blurred vision, Lena saw Dr. Wei reaching through the broken window, his hand extended toward her. "Come on," he shouted. "You can make it." Summoning her remaining strength, Lena staggered to her feet and lunged for the window. She grasped Wei's hand just as the containment chamber behind her failed completely. A wave of energy surged through the lab, destroying everything in its path. Wei pulled with all his might, dragging Lena through the window as the silvery substance from the chamber expanded in a rapidly growing sphere. They fell together onto the floor of the original lab just as the lockdown shutters sealed the broken window, containing the reaction in the adjacent room. Lena lay gasping on the floor, her body throbbing with pain. But they weren't safe yet. The lockdown had trapped them in Laboratory 7, and the effects of the containment breach were still spreading. Around them, equipment continued to fail as the molecular structure of various materials destabilized. "We need to neutralize it," Lena said, struggling to her feet. "The X109 in my bloodstream, it resonated with the sample. I felt it." "What are you talking about?" Wei demanded, helping the other researchers toward an emergency exit that was still partially open. Lena stumbled to a supply cabinet and began pulling out chemicals. X109 responds to electromagnetic fields and emotional states. If we can generate the right combination of both, we might be able to stabilize it, make it inert. "That's theoretical at best," Wei argued. "We need to evacuate before the whole lab collapses." "There's no time," Lena insisted, "and nowhere to go. The lockdown has sealed us in. Our only chance is to stop the reaction." She worked feverishly, mixing chemicals to create an isotope stabilizer, a compound that might interrupt the atomic reconfiguration process of X109. It was a desperate gamble based on the limited research she and Marco had conducted. While she worked, Wei helped her, his initial skepticism giving way to grudging cooperation as the situation deteriorated around them. The other researchers managed to force the emergency exit open wider, providing a potential escape route. "It's ready," Lena announced, holding up a flask of pale blue liquid. "But I need to introduce it directly into the reaction chamber." "Impossible," Wei said. "The adjacent lab is completely unstable now. Nothing could survive in there." Lena touched the vial of concentrated X109 in her pocket. "I think I can. The element in my blood, it created a kind of harmonic resonance with the sample. If I can replicate that state—" "You'll be killed," Wei protested. "Maybe," Lena acknowledged. "But if I don't try, We all die when this reaction spreads beyond containment. Before Wei could argue further, Lena approached the sealed window. The metal shutter had emergency override controls, designed to allow rescue teams access in the event of a catastrophe. Wei joined her at the controls. "You're insane," he said, but his tone had softened. "But I think you might be right about the resonance effect. We observed similar phenomena in earlier tests." Together, they bypassed the safety protocols and raised the shutter just enough to create a small opening. Through the gap, they could see the adjacent lab had been transformed. The silvery substance had expanded to fill much of the room, objects suspended within it as if frozen in time. "The reaction is creating a localized stasis field," Wei observed. "Time itself is being affected." Lena held up the flask of stabilizer. "I need to get this to the center, to the original containment chamber. The reaction is emanating from there." "How?" Wei asked. "You can't enter that field." Lena closed her eyes, focusing on the sensation she had felt earlier, the connection between the X109 in her blood and the concentrated sample. She visualized that harmony, that resonance, trying to recapture the feeling. Slowly, the tingling warmth returned to her body. When she opened her eyes, Wei was staring at her in astonishment. "Your eyes," he whispered. "They're silver." Lena didn't waste time looking for a reflection. She could feel the change in herself, a heightened awareness, a connection to the element that had taken up residence in her body. "I'm going in," she said, her voice strangely calm. "If I don't return in 5 minutes, seal this place completely and evacuate everyone you can." Before Wei could respond, Lena squeezed through the opening in the shutter and entered the transformed lab. The sensation was indescribable. The air felt thick, resistant, as if she were moving through liquid. Around her, debris hung suspended, shards of glass, papers, even droplets of water from a broken pipe. But Lena herself could move, albeit slowly, pushing through the stasis field created by the X109 reaction. At the center of the room, the remains of the containment chamber glowed with an intense silver light. The concentrated X109 had formed a perfect sphere about 1 meter in diameter, pulsating with what seemed like a heartbeat. Lena approached it, each step requiring enormous effort. The flask of stabilizer felt heavy in her hand, its contents shifting sluggishly. As she neared the sphere, the resonance between her blood and the concentrated element grew stronger. She could feel X109 responding to her presence, to her emotions, curiosity, fear, determination. Understanding flooded her mind. X109 wasn't just an element, it was a form of exotic matter capable of processing information, emotional information, and using it to evolve. It had been using human carriers to learn, to adapt to Earth's environment. Lena stood before the pulsating sphere, flask in hand. She now realized that the stabilizer might not just neutralize the reaction, it could destroy X109 entirely, eliminating a potentially sentient form of matter. But the reaction was growing more unstable by the second. If left unchecked, it would expand beyond the lab, beyond Unigen, affecting everything it touched. She had no choice. With a silent apology to the strange element that had altered her life, Lena uncapped the flask and poured its contents directly into the sphere. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pulsations accelerated, the silver light intensifying to a blinding glow. Lena felt a surge of energy pass through her body, a wave of information too vast to comprehend. Images flashed through her mind, distant stars, swirling nebulae, alien landscapes. X109 was showing her its origins, its journey across the cosmos. It had been traveling for millions of years, carried on solar winds, searching for hosts capable of providing the emotional energy it needed to evolve. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. The sphere contracted, condensing into a small, dense object that fell to the floor with a metallic ping. Around Lena, the stasis field collapsed, sending suspended debris crashing down. She barely had time to shield herself as gravity reasserted its dominance. When the chaos subsided, Lena found herself standing amid the wreckage of the lab, miraculously unharmed. On the floor at her feet, lay a small, silvery disk, about the size of a coin, the remains of X-109, now stabilized into a form that could exist in harmony with Earth's physics. Lena picked it up carefully. It felt warm in her palm, resonating faintly with the traces of the element still in her bloodstream. Not destroyed then, merely transformed. The emergency shutters began to rise as the containment systems registered the neutralization of the threat. Dr. Wei and the other researchers stood on the other side, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. "What happened?" Wei asked as Lena stepped through the opening, the silver disc clutched in her hand. "I stabilized it," she replied, her voice hoarse. "But there's more to X-109 than we realized, much more." Security teams arrived moments later, followed by Dr. Corwin and Agent Reyes. Their faces fell when they saw Lena standing amid the researchers, very much alive and holding the stabilized remains of their secret project. "Dr. Park," Corwin began, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You have interfered with classified research and endangered countless lives. Agent Reyes will take you into custody immediately." "I don't think so," Lena replied calmly. "Not unless you want the world to know about X-109, about how you've been experimenting on unwitting carriers, about how you nearly caused a catastrophe that could have affected the entire city." She held up the silver disc. "I understand it now. It showed me everything, including the data you've been hiding. This element isn't a weapon or a commodity. It's a form of communication, a bridge between Earth and something far beyond our comprehension." Reyes stepped forward. "Hand over the sample, Dr. Park." "No." Lena stood her ground. X-109 is already out there, in the bloodstreams of who knows how many people. You can't contain it anymore, but we can learn from it, understand it, find a way to coexist with it safely. "That decision isn't yours to make," Corwin snapped. "It is now," Lena countered, "because I'm the only one who can communicate with it, the only one who understands what it wants." A standoff ensued, tension filling the air. Then a new voice entered the conversation. "She's right." All heads turned to see Aisha and Marco standing in the doorway, accompanied by an older man in an expensive suit. "Director Phillips," Corwin said, his face paling, "this is an unexpected pleasure." "I imagine it is," replied the man, his tone icy. "Especially since I was under the impression that Project Stardust had been terminated months ago. Imagine my surprise when I received an urgent message about a containment breach involving the very element I ordered you to stop experimenting with." Director Phillips turned to Lena. "Dr. Park, I believe your colleagues here have shared some very interesting data with me. Data suggesting that X-109 is not the threat we initially believed, but rather a form of exotic matter with unique properties that might benefit humanity, if properly understood and respected." He extended his hand. "I represent the Interstellar Research Consortium. We've been monitoring Unigen's activities for some time, concerned about their approach to extraterrestrial materials. I believe we could use someone with your insights on our team." Lena glanced at Marco and Aisha, who nodded encouragingly. "On one condition," she said, turning back to Phillips. "Complete transparency. Everything we learn about X-109 is shared openly with the scientific community and the public. No more secrets, no more experimentation on unwitting carriers." Phillips considered this, then nodded. "Agreed. In fact, that aligns perfectly with the consortium's mission. We believe knowledge of this kind belongs to all humanity." Corwin sputtered in protest, but a sharp look from Phillips silenced him. "As for you, Dr. Corwin," Phillips continued, "the board will be very interested to hear about your unauthorized continuation of Project Stardust. I suspect your tenure at Unigen is coming to an end." In the weeks that followed, Lena worked with the Interstellar Research Consortium to develop a comprehensive framework for studying and monitoring X-109. Her first priority was establishing protocols for identifying and supporting carriers, people whose bloodstreams contained the element. Blood tests across major cities confirmed what she had suspected. X-109 had spread beyond Unigen, appearing in small concentrations in the general population. Most carriers showed no symptoms, and the element remained dormant in their systems. With the stabilized sample, now officially classified as an extraterrestrial information matrix rather than an element, Lena and her team made remarkable discoveries. X-109 could process and store emotional data, using it to refine its atomic structure. It had been doing this for millennia, traveling through space and temporarily bonding with various life forms it encountered. Earth, with its abundance of emotionally complex beings, had provided X-109 with an unprecedented opportunity to evolve. But rather than seeking to control or harm its hosts, the element appeared to be attempting communication, a cosmic exchange of information. Lena published her findings openly, as promised. Initial public reaction ranged from fear to fascination. But as more was understood about X-109's benign nature, acceptance grew. The scientific community embraced the challenge of studying this extraterrestrial visitor, developing new theories about matter, consciousness, and the interconnectedness of the universe. For Lena personally, the journey had just begun. The traces of X-109 in her blood had created a unique connection, one that allowed her to perceive aspects of reality previously hidden. She could sense the element's presence in others, could feel its subtle influence on emotional states and thought patterns. 6 months after the incident at Unigen, Lena stood on the observation deck of the consortium's new research facility, gazing up at the night sky. The stars seemed different to her now, not distant points of light, but potential sources of other exotic particles, other forms of information seeking connection. Marco joined her at the railing. "Still communing with your silver friend?" he asked, nodding toward the small disc she wore on a chain around her neck. Lena smiled. "It has a lot to say. Did you know there are at least 7 other forms of exotic matter drifting through our solar system right now? X-109 is just the first to find us. Should we be worried?" "I don't think so," Lena replied, her hand closing around the disc. "They're not invaders or conquerors. They're explorers, like us, seeking understanding across the vastness of space." Marco leaned against the railing. "So what happens now? We just wait for more alien elements to show up in our blood?" "Now," Lena said, turning to face her friend. "We prepare. We learn everything we can from X-109. And then, when we're ready, we answer back." Above them, the stars continued their silent vigil, witnesses to humanity's first steps toward a new kind of cosmic dialogue, one written not in radio waves or mathematical formulas, but in the ancient language of matter itself, carried in the blood of a species finally ready to join the conversation.